All right, this is September 13, 2017. My lesson is titled Original Hebrew Language Was Split. Listen to this from Genesis chapter 11, verse 1 to verse 9.
And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they had imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth. And from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth.
Okay, so as you know, I'm rereading the Bible from Genesis chapter 1. I'm rethinking the Bible. Not to disprove the Bible. I'm not driven like that. Although some people will be upset at me for some of the questions I ask, some of the things I think and so on. It's just that when I read the Bible, and now coming into this Israelite understanding, there's all this talk about the precepts and the wisdom of the Most High, and how the word should be clicking together from the different precepts and so on, and how the Most High used wisdom to create the earth, and the Israelites were just the baddest thing, blah, 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 but they got taken on because of. So, when you look at this group of people that the Bible surrounds, later called the children of Israel, seems to me like they were very wise, very smart. And so that's why I'm asking the questions, because if these people were so smart, how come they left behind a book that's filled with so much strange stuff, so much questions that we can't seem to answer? Now, we know the liars out there change up dates in history and stuff like that and whatever. But you still got to question this stuff, right? You still got to ask, because some stuff just really seem kind of odd. And so it's just a part of my learning. I'm not trying to disprove the Bible. I'm trying to understand it. I'm trying to find the Creator. And so I'm asking the questions as I reread the Bible. Now, I told you the whole Adam thing seems strange, and doing a little bit of studies today, I was thinking some more about Adam and so on, so I got some more stuff to share at another time with Adam. But when I look at this Tower of Babel story, I'm just wondering with the Hebrew language here, how it says that the whole earth had one speech. And I was doing some reading today, and this author was saying, I don't remember his name now, but he was saying that we generally say the earth had one language because the Bible says so. And so a lot of people usually lean towards that. So the Bible seems authoritative with that, because hardly anybody talks about language changing and so on, and from ancient times and splitting and so on, without coming across the Bible talking about it. But it says that the whole earth was of one language and of one speech, and we're told that language was Hebrew. And I'm saying, I don't think it was Hebrew. But that's just what I think. And I've told you many times before, I may in the end come back and tell you, yeah, it was Hebrew. But I don't know that yet for sure. It just doesn't seem like it's Hebrew to me. Because this whole argument of, oh, it's just the modern Hebrew that they changed up, and that's why it seems confusing. It just still, that doesn't answer enough for me. But Genesis 11:1 says the whole earth had this one language and they were of one speech, so they understood each other, probably like the same dialect. So if they had the one language, it was for everybody. Everyone was using it. Like the one sun is for everybody. The one moon is for everybody. So it is their language. This is not the language of the Hebrews or the language of the Shemites. This is the language of the earth. So however many nations of people, this is the language they all had. They can say this is our tongue. So in terms of being set apart, this language doesn't just belong to the people that the Most High was dealing with. So verse 5, and the Most High came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. So he moves around. He came down to see it. And he said, the people is one. Now it looks like they were doing something evil based on what we usually all teach, but they had a unity in it. They have all one language. I mean, the way that is said right there, and this apparently is the Creator speaking this makes you wonder for an extra second or two, because is it a problem that the people is one, or is he trying to say something else? Because isn't unity a good thing? Or maybe that all the people of different nations are one, and that might be the problem. But whatever it is, the people are one seems to tick off the Most High, and he's like, we got to do something about this, because they are one. They have one language. So they are one. I put the capacity in them to become one. And they have all one language, and I gave them all one language on the earth. But I have a problem with it, so I'm just going to break up the language. Because nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. So all this talk about you can do anything you want as long as you put your mind to it, which I've said for years, as well as I learned that growing up and so on, it doesn't seem like that is an absolute truth based on this right here, because sometimes when you really put your mind to do certain things, the Creator might not like it. So now he says, let's go and damage their language. So he's going to damage a set-apart Hebrew language. If we say Hebrew is a language, he's going to do something to their... Notice, it's not just simply saying he's going to do something to the people. He's going to damage the language of the Shemites. He's going to damage the language of who we would call the Israelites later. He's going to damage the set-apart tongue. Right? Remember, I did a lesson maybe a month or two ago telling you that when the Most High is done with certain stuff, when he's passing judgment, he damages it. If it doesn't work out right, he breaks it up, damages it. And you might only just leave traces of it for you to find your way back. He damaged Eden. You can't, kick them out and whatever, they can't get back in. But here he damages the language again. And we're still thousands of years later trying to find our way back to that original language. So the Creator is just like, he just breaks up the stuff. He's just like, no. But he confounds their language. So this is not just the language of the Shemites or the language of the set-apart people of the Most High. He damages the language that was the language of the earth, that they may not understand one another's speech. Now, then he does something to the people further. He scatters them. But I notice here that it's not saying that he made up a whole lot of new languages. It just says he did something to the existing one. So he confounded. He brought confusion to their language so they could not speak and understand it properly. Now, if people want to go on and make new languages from their confusion, then that's something they did. But the Most High did not create languages from what I'm understanding here in this verse. He more broke up something that was there and made it more difficult for them to use, so that they would not have that oneness or togetherness anymore in what they were trying to do. This is my consideration here that's giving me a problem. If he confounded their language, then later on we know Abraham going, and the Canaanites are calling him Abraham the Hebrew. So he could understand their language. Abraham could understand the Syrians. He could understand the Syriac, the Aramaic, whichever language it was that Abraham really had. He seemed to have, like I said before, magically be able to understand and communicate with anybody else, which I pointed out before, as I learned in my little slow learning here, that he would have been using what's called the lingua franca. That would allow him, it's like a bridge language between whatever was there. Now, he can speak to other people. And I noticed, though, that when he came to the Canaanites, they could understand him. See that? They couldn't communicate enough at Babel to still finish the job, but they can communicate enough with Abraham to still deal with him. So why didn't they understand each other enough to still pass the bricks? If you say that tower was a real physical tower, which I don't think it is. But it could very well be. I haven't studied that part fully yet, but certain things let me think that it's not a physical tower. So all these things they're showing you, the monuments of this and whatever, and that could just all be a trick. But they could understand Abraham to deal with him. Hittites could understand him. They could all, right? If you have a lingua franca, then somebody understands different languages enough to make a bridge language that can work with it all. Like when you're making some device that's going to work with other contraptions, you know the other contraptions that are there and so on to make this particular device to click with all of them. Or you wouldn't be able to get the job done of making that bridge device. So whoever says let's use lingua franca, Aramaic as lingua franca, for example, they could understand the other languages enough to do so. But who knows, maybe they just took time to learn bits and pieces of the other languages to figure out. But Abraham seems to have been able to communicate. We generally think, maybe possibly because of some bias, that Abraham's language was not affected. So the holy, righteous, or the set-apart man of God he had the original language still. He continued with it, especially for those who say Aramaic was the language. Well, he was speaking Aramaic, so there you go. So then, if Aramaic was his language, Abraham's language, then if he's using that as a lingua franca, that means he's speaking the original tongue of the earth in order to speak to Canaanites and anybody else and Hittites and so on, right? To do whatever he needs to do, his business and his trade and whatever he's doing. But I noticed then, if that is the case, that Abraham is still speaking the pure language, whether it's Aramaic or original Hebrew, Paleo Hebrew, whatever it was he was speaking, people are getting punished for doing something evil like being in unity and building this tower. So the Most High slapped up their language. But Abraham was, from what they tell us in these extra biblical writings, he was an idol worshipper in his father's house, in a line of idol worshipping people, worshipping other gods and providing them their food. So he was worshipping, if that story is correct, as an idolater. But his language doesn't get hit for doing that, but the people who are doing something in unity, they get hit with a curse by the Most High. But while Abraham is worshipping idols, he keeps his pure Aramaic language or his pure Hebrew language, so that Canaanites can now identify, oh, this is Abraham the Hebrew, as if he's a righteous man and he's set apart from us. And we can tell that and identify that by identifying him as Abraham the Hebrew. In other words, Abraham, the man of the original tongue of God. By just asking you something. You believe it's Aramaic, you believe it's Paleo-Hebrew, you believe it's Hebrew, whatever in the world you think it is. Why is it that when they got cursed on the Tower of Babel, that they just simply didn't come down from the tower, go on living their lives, and pick up building the tower again after they relearned the language? Look at the chapter before that in Genesis chapter 10 and verse 31 and 32. These are the sons of Shem after their families, after their tongues, in their lands after their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So, well, I guess I really don't need the third one, but it's saying that they got their tongues. Now, somebody's saying that 11 and 10 should have been switched around, and that chapter 11 with the splitting of the tongue should have come first before this chapter, chapter 10. But whatever the real deal is with the Bible, the book of God, that's straightforward to us, we still have to keep wondering. If they've got their different tongues and so on, and these are the children of Shem, and we're saying that we come out of Shem, so the wise people are supposed to rule the earth, and the Israelites going to come out of Shem. Whether you're of Shem or not, if you're building this Tower of Babel that angers the Creator so much that you are united and you work together on the earth, and he damaged your language, you know that the only reason you stopped building that tower and got split up is because you no longer have a language that unites you all. Why is it that for a couple thousand years until now, 2017, all these different nations don't try to learn one language to rebuild? Or way back then, why didn't they try to learn back the same language of the original Hebrew? If you tell me, because I've heard some say Shem's line or Abraham and them didn't lose the language because they had it, they weren't a part of this building of the Tower of Babel, so they weren't cursed with a language problem. Are you such idiots? You're running empires? Why don't you just go to Abraham or whichever Shemite was around, Noah, and all of them at each stage, and just learn back the language? You come down from the Tower of Babel, and instead of going way to the other side of the earth where you're scattered, why didn't you just go 15 miles down to the Shemites who are not a part of the curse and just say, teach us back the language? People were doing it all the time. Why didn't these wise people who are smart enough to unite to grab the Creator's attention, using up the brain power to do all that, to the point where the Moses is like, man, their brain power is firing up. That's the brain I gave them, but I don't like what they're doing. I'm going to stop them. So they're smart enough to go all the way up, and like the extra biblical book saying, they got so high that they're firing, shooting arrows up to heaven and blooding up the angels up there, that God felt threatened about that. So apparently they're killing angels with mere arrows. But they can do all of these great things and figure out how to build such a very tall structure. It seems to me, from the description in the text of the Holy Bible of God, to be of a height that no other nation on earth with great builders have been able to duplicate. And they got that high, but they are not smart enough to say, let's just go learn the language from the ones who were not involved in this in the same way. Why didn't they just go back and learn the Hebrew? Hey, we got corrupted, we repent, teach us the language again, and then go back later and pick it up if that's the evil that they want to continue doing. It's simple. Just go back and just ask somebody, can you teach us back the original Hebrew? We already know some of it, it just got corrupted. Why? People always rebuild. If the earth blows up now and a few of us survive, people are going to rebuild and restart again. You're going to make cars all over again. People who know how to deal with children, they're going to make toys and so on. People who like doing building, they're going to build houses all over again and pave roads all over again. We're going to do all kinds of stuff. You get in an accident, you go through physical therapy, something happens with your voice, you go through speech therapy. With your brain, you go through speech therapy and so on. Why didn't these guys go through speech or language therapy and just learn back the original Hebrew language, since they know that is the way to probably defeat God or defeat the Shemites that he's working with? You're telling me they're so dumb? You know what it takes to build a structure that high to go up to the heavens to shoot angels? And your mind doesn't have enough sense to say, let's learn about the original Hebrew, when they were closer to the original Hebrew in their time, closer than we are now, because It was actually being used at the time when they were living, because they themselves in their lifetime were speaking it. It's just that they got cursed. So let's say they got cursed today. This morning they were speaking it. Let's say if the Most High came at like 12 o'clock, midday or so, and cursed them. 11 o'clock they were speaking it. So they got up speaking the original language that Adam was speaking this morning, and they got cursed. Just come down, take a break, and just start learning it tomorrow or next week. Problem solved. You can go back and restore. So now I close it. It seems strange to me as I wonder, rereading the Bible, why all these smart men who went on to building great empires that was even damaging the Shemites. Even Israelites couldn't contain them sometimes when Israelites were transgressing. Israelites could hardly defend themselves against them. Sometimes Israelites didn't even want to fight. But they just did not say, let's learn back the language. Aren't you and I learning languages today? Aren't we learning Hebrew today? People are learning French, Spanish, all kinds of different languages today. These smart people, when the brain power was strong on the earth, when the air was much purer, and food was much cleaner and not yet poisoned and so on, and they never said with their brain power that attracted the Most High in the first place, hey, let's just learn Hebrew. Just go take a Hebrew class, that's all. Original Paleo Hebrew is restored, but they didn't do that.